Hot milk? 5 surprising facts that the dairy industry doesn't tell you. Hi, it's Michelle at Our Conscious Kitchen. Today we're going to look past the marketing spin from the dairy industry and governmental institutions, and we're going to look past the information that's been given to the public for the past 100 years. We'll look at how this misguided information campaign began and how it's evolved to both promote dairy products, yet hides the consequences from the consumption of those products. I'll explain 5 things that the industry just doesn't want you to know. To start though, the consumption of milk began when animals were first domesticated. That was about 10,000 years ago. However, for the previous 200,000 years before that, humans just weren't drinking milk or eating dairy. And it wasn't until the early to mid 20th century that dairy became a recommended part of our everyday diet and consumption skyrocketed. You see, the road to heavy consumption starting during the First World War, as governments sent powdered and canned milk overseas for the Allied troops. Because of this, more milk was needed to be produced, and farmers started breeding and increasing their herds. They ended up turning farms that used to produce many different things into only dairy farms. But then after the war ended, the demand for dairy dropped a lot. However, the farmers' production didn't go down. They didn't turn down the supply as the demand went down. Instead, they turned to the government to increase the amount of milk that people consumed. They created the idea that milk was needed for human development and growth. This soon led to free milk for school children, as well as large advertising campaigns to increase consumption. There still was too much being produced, though, so the government started buying up and storing the products. Hey, Debbie, nice to see you. Great to see you again here. We're just talking about the history of milk here. So basically, as these advertising campaigns started to increase the consumption, there still was too much milk being produced. So the government started buying up and storing the products. In the U.S., in 1977, the U.S. government set out a new subsidy program that gave $2 billion to the industry over 4 years to buy the excess. So that's a little bit of the history of how our heavy consumption of milk started. And thanks to Earthling Ed for compiling that info. He's got a great YouTube video on it if you want to check it out. So we have the advertising and the government agencies sending out messages using their bully pulpits, telling us that we need to consume these products. And of course, they looked for those points that made their case, such as the fact that dairy products do contain protein. But as much more research was done and new information became known, they didn't report on it. They didn't tell people what those new findings were showing. In spite of that, in the US, milk consumption has declined by 40% since the 1970s. However, cheese and other dairy products are up. The consumption has gone up. In the US, cheese consumption is up 20% over the last decade. But the first thing they didn't tell you is that 65% of the world population is genetically unable to digest milk because of lactose intolerance. Within certain ethnic groups, that percentage rises to 90%. You can see here on the chart that in Japan it's actually at 98%, and in China it's at 95%. Interestingly, the ability to digest lactose too has now been found to actually be a recent genetic mutation. Lactose intolerance is when your small intestine cannot digest or break down lactose. It's the sugar that's naturally found in milk and milk products. This can cause bloating, gas, and diarrhea. Nothing fun about that. Most infants can digest lactose, but then many people begin to develop a reduced capacity to digest lactose after infancy. It naturally occurs. This used to be considered a disorder, though, but now we actually know that it's normal and consider it normal, meaning it's normal for adults to lose the ability to digest lactose. Number 2, dairy doesn't build strong bones. Contrary to popular belief, dairy doesn't increase bone strength. In fact, it's been shown to have the opposite effect. It actually increases bone fractures. Besides the studies that show this, just think about it logically. Countries with the lowest rates of dairy consumption, like in Asia and in Africa, have the lowest rates of osteoporosis. Calcium itself isn't as bone protective as we thought. Studies actually show that vitamin D is much more effective at preventing fractures. And if you eat animal products, hey Julia! All right, no wonder you stopped drinking cow's milk years ago. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so that's good. Studies have actually shown that vitamin D is much more effective at preventing fractures. So, and also, if you eat animal products to get your protein, change that. Because animal proteins, as opposed to plant proteins, produce acid. And when they're broken down in our bodies, we get more acidic. And then calcium neutralizes this acid. So in order to neutralize and flush out the acids, our bodies have to use the calcium that milk contains, as well as some that we have stored up in our bones. So every time we drink milk or we eat ice cream coming from animal products, from dairy, the calcium is leaching out of our bones too. So that's why studies have shown that those who drink most cow's milk have higher bone fracture rates than those who don't drink cow's milk. And if you're worried about losing calcium, though, another way to reduce calcium loss is to actually avoid excess salt, because sodium in the foods that you eat increases calcium loss through your kidneys. So avoid salty snacks, canned and jarred foods with added salt, and keep the salt off the dinner table. It's a good practice in general. So, number 3, dairy is full of saturated fat, which causes heart disease. A single serving of milk contains more than 20% of the recommended daily amount. So if you consume 3 servings in a day, you'd already be at 60% for the day. And that's without having eaten any food. The number 1 source of saturated fat in American diets is actually from dairy products. That's right, more saturated fat is consumed in dairy than in beef. And as I've recently learned from Dr. Will Bulsiewicz in his awesome 7-week course, The Plant-Fed Gut, because whatever our gut adapts to towards whatever we eat, our gut, sees what we're eating, it adapts to that. And so the saturated fat in animal products that we put in our gut pushes our gut microbiome towards becoming more inflammatory, which promotes heart disease and other problems like the risk of cancer. High dairy consumption increases our cancer risk. There are so many studies showing this connection. There are studies showing that the high intake of dairy products, including low-fat products, can increase total prostate risk. Yet diets without any dairy products have been shown to slow the spread. Also, high levels of casein in protein that makes up 87% of cow milk can turn on cancer genes. But no or low levels of casein protein turn them off. So studies show that milk contains also large amounts of estrogen and other placental hormones from the cows. These are hormones that occur naturally in the cow's body. All foods coming from animals contain hormones. They survive the processing of the milk into ice cream and cheese too, and then are present in organic and non-organic commercial milk as well. In fact, estrogens are 5 times more concentrated in cream and cheese, and 10 times more hormones are concentrated in butter. This is just looking at natural hormones, not even the bovine growth hormone or some of the other hormones that are injected into the animals. So again, it really doesn't matter if the dairy or the meat is organic. Animals produce hormones because they're animals. One study showed that people don't know that cows only give milk after having a calf, or that cows contain so much natural hormone. A female cow, after giving birth, is actually impregnated again in a month or 2 while still lactating because we want the milk. And then people are exposed to even more estrogen from the milk of the pregnant cows. And people don't realize that the calf is also taken away from its mother. So people have, milk that's actually meant for the calf. So much for preventing animal cruelty by not eating meat if you're still eating cheese or drinking milk. One study following 53,000 women over 8 years found that those who were drinking 2 to 3 glasses of cow's milk a day increased their risk of breast cancer by 70 to 80%. But replacing cow's milk with soy milk actually reduced that cancer risk by 30%. Eating products like cheese or milk means you're also eating those hormones right along with the products, unfortunately. All of these things affect a person's hormonal system. Another way it affects women is with the amount of time they're fertile. There was a 2017 study that was able to count the egg reserves that women have. They actually were able to do an objective measure and see what types of diet the people had. So they took the number of eggs in reserve and converted it into a biological age, or a number of years that they had reserves for. And they found that there was a 13-year difference in the length of time that a woman is fertile based upon the number of eggs they had. So basically, the more dairy they consumed, the shorter the length of time that they were actually fertile within their lifespan or number of eggs that they had. So one trick, though, if you do have some dairy in your diet, is to also make sure you're drinking black tea, because black tea contains types of polyphenols that reduce the concentration of estradiol, which can reduce hormone-related cancer risk. Number 5. There's nothing in dairy that we can't get from plants. And the calcium found in kale and broccoli is even better with its absorption rate. It's about double that of cow's milk. When the calcium is in plants, it comes, also without, all that other baggage that we're getting from the dairy. It comes with bonuses too of fiber, folate, iron, antioxidants, and vitamin K, which is really good for our bones. Some plants that are higher in calcium include different greens, beans, tofu, and figs. Hey, Crystal. Crystal stopped drinking milk but still eating cheese. Yeah, that's a hard one to give up, I know. But luckily, there's some great plant-based cheeses that are out on the market if you can find ones that don't have all the saturated fat of all the coconut oils in it. But there's some great plant-based cheeses and great recipes, easy to make at home too. I'll be going into some of that. Actually, if you want, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be putting a link. So just hang on one second here. So basically, I just wanted to say that we don't need to eat all that dairy, right? It's not what we ate for 95% of our time on Earth. So what I was going to say is if you'd like to raise your nutrition IQ and you enjoyed this chat and you want to learn more about how the food and the science intersect, if you're busy, I'm going to make it easy for you. So you can go to my link here, where if I can pull this up, let's see. All right, there we go. I got the link. And I think maybe Dalip can put it in the chat for me too. But it is a recipe for a plant-based macaroni and cheese. That's really not too difficult to make, and it tastes really, really yummy. So try that, Crystal, and maybe see if that can, help to, overcome your cravings. I mean, it's all about psychologically what your brain is used to and trying to overcome the craving, right? You don't expect it to be exactly the same, but you can expect it to taste really yummy. And I think that's the point. That's what we'd all want our food to be, really, really yummy. So, so does anybody have any questions here? Same, cheese is hard to give up. I know, that was like my hardest thing to give up. Really, it really is, until you can kind of wean your brain off of it and you set that barrier, right? You kind of create that fence and say, I'm really not going to eat it, or just eat it in special occasions. But sometimes that's hard for people. If they decide they want to eat it only in special occasions, it might snowball and you might find yourself eating cheese every week or even every day. So it just depends on your willpower too. Sometimes the fence is the best thing to have and say, I'm not going to have it anymore. Or, try the macaroni and cheese recipe. There's some other recipes too that I'll have, coming up on the website and in my upcoming course. We'll go through how to make different cheeses. Basically can do any kind of cheese you want, something that's similar to Parmesan, something that's like a Boursin spread, something that's like this macaroni and cheese that's really good. There's a few fun ingredients, secret ingredients, not so secret anymore. A lot of people are doing it, but everybody has a unique spin on how they make recipes, and I think I've got some great recipes to share with people. What milk substitute would I recommend for kids? Kids, yeah, so sometimes their taste, either you run into two things. Either their taste is not formed, so they're open to things and they're willing to try new things, or maybe they're very fussy and they don't like to try much. Kids who are used to fresh milk. Well, I think probably soy and oat milk are the thickest consistency. So if they're used to the dairy milk, you might want to try something that has a thicker consistency just because it is thick. Sometimes you get into some of the almond milk or the cashew milk, and it's a little bit more watered down in taste or mouth feel. You're trying to get to something that's a little bit more fatting feeling like the milk, and although oat doesn't have fat in it, it's got a little bit more of a thicker feel. Yeah, fussy. I don't know if you could maybe, like, if they like chocolate milk, is there an option to mix in a little bit of cacao powder and make it into a chocolate milk? And then it just becomes something totally different, but yet something that they like, right? Because they like chocolate. Kids like chocolate. So maybe there's a way to put in chocolate or some, mix in something else to make it a different thing that's still yummy that they want to eat. So maybe try that. I think that could help. So hopefully that helps. Yeah, they like chocolate milk. Okay, great. Yeah, so I would try that. Maybe get the oat milk. Probably that's a good, a thicker taste. I think they have a barista blend if you look for that Oatly brand that's sold here in Hong Kong. I know you're in Hong Kong, so if you look for that Oatly brand, if you look for the barista blend, that one is actually made a little bit thicker for making your frothing on your coffees, for your lattes and your specialized coffee drinks. So try doing that one because it's a little bit thicker, so closer to the taste of milk, and then maybe add in a little bit of cacao powder. The Oatly chocolate milk is awesome. That's true. It is. I know totally if you like that. But the thing with that is it's got a little bit of sugar in the Oatly version. So I didn't want to suggest that. But yeah, you could go for that, but just be aware that it does have sugar in it too. I'd actually rather prefer to buy one without sugar and then add in the chocolate taste. But if you do that temporarily and don't do it too often, it shouldn't be too bad as long as they're not having so much sugar in their diet, right? I have it every day and love it. Inspiration there. So hopefully that's helpful. I would love it if you can download that mac and cheese recipe. Debbie, I don't know if you're still here. I don't know if you tried the recipe from last week with the ranch salad dressing and how that turned out, but hopefully that was good for you. So if no other questions, then basically I will say have a great day ahead and bye for now.